Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how you can make the world's densest metal float. So I have in my hand here 1 gram of osmium. Osmium is the densest metal on Earth. It's around twice as dense as lead. The other cool thing about osmium is its pale blue color. It's one of the only metals that has this naturally pale blue color like this. Now osmium metal by itself is relatively safe, but it can form an oxide with the air called osmium tetroxide, and it's one of the most toxic substances there is. Let me show you just how dense this is. So this tiny little bit here weighs 1 gram. For comparison, this is 1 gram of lead. And here it is compared to one of the least dense metals on Earth, sodium metal. So this is about 1 gram of sodium metal. Look at it compared to my osmium. That's just so crazy that both of these metals, completely solid throughout it, can have such different densities. This little tiny bead of osmium weighs as much as this big chunk of sodium. So why is osmium so dense? Well, if you look at its place on the periodic table, you'll see that it isn't the heaviest atom. Its atomic number is only 76. There are many other atoms that are much heavier. But if we look at its atomic radius, you'll see for the number of protons it has, it's very small. The reason this happens is really interesting because the inner electrons have to orbit the nucleus so fast because there are so many attractive protons in the center. And they go so fast that due to relativistic effects, the electron's mass increases and that makes it orbit even closer to the nucleus. So this in effect makes the atoms smaller. But this happens to a lot of other heavy atoms as well. The third factor is how the atoms are stacked together. They stack together in a hexagonal close packed pattern. This stacking is the densest way which you can fit a regular pattern of spheres together. So because osmium is so dense, that means that it's going to sink in every other liquid. But there actually is a way to make it float. Now regular buoyancy happens when you displace a volume of fluid with something else. And if the volume of fluid weighs more than the thing you replaced it with, then it will cause that thing to float up. So for osmium, because it's the densest thing in the world, the fluid that it's in can't weigh more than it, so the osmium will always sink. But that gave me an idea. A while ago, I was playing with my giant neodymium magnet and a bunch of ferrofluid. And I noticed that when you put the ferrofluid on the magnet, there's an extra pressure that you get when you submerge your hand in the liquid. It feels like there's really strong buoyancy pushing your hand out of the liquid. So when the ferrofluid is on the magnet, you can see that when I drop a coin in it, the coin just pops right out. So I can easily float the coin on the surface. Now the reason this happens is because of something called secondary buoyancy. This happens when there's an extra force besides gravity making a buoyancy term. Normal buoyancy happens because gravity is always pulling down on things, and things that are heavy will move to the bottom. But in this case with the ferrofluid, you have the buoyancy of the regular ferrofluid, but in addition to that, you have the magnetic force pulling the ferrofluid down into the magnet. So there's an extra term that makes that liquid weigh more. But it's not a true weight, it's just an extra magnetic force pulling it down harder. But the effect of it is an extra buoyancy. So I wanted to see if the secondary buoyancy of the ferrofluid on my giant neodymium magnet was enough to make the osmium actually float on top of it. So let's get a good amount in here so you know it's not touching the bottom. Okay, so I have this liquid right here. You can see this is just a normal liquid. So let's see if our osmium actually floats on it. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Whoa, it's on the surface right there. Look at it bouncing up and down. It's literally floating on the surface. It's not sinking. So you can see how deep this is, but somehow the osmium is still floating on it. When I put my finger on it, it has a ton of force pushing my finger back up. As soon as I remove it from the magnet, it only has the gravity term in there causing the buoyancy, and so the osmium sinks. But when I move it back over the magnet, it now adds that magnetic term to it, and so it causes the osmium to float to the top. So this is really interesting. Even though osmium is the densest material on Earth, you actually can float it on a liquid because you can add an extra magnetic term to that liquid without affecting the osmium too much. And thanks again for watching another episode of the Action Lab. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. And you can also hit the bell so you can be notified when I release my latest video. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.